Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. I'm Glenn Bottomley, and today my guest is Lindsay Tjepkema, CEO and founder of Casted, a podcast and video marketing platform for B2B brands to better understand and grow their audience. Thanks for joining us today, Lindsay.
Thank you so much for having me, Glenn. I'm really excited to be here. This will be fun.
Well, first off, you yourself have a podcast as well.
Do.
And so not only running a podcast and a marketing company. So what do you think is so special about podcasts as a thought leadership vehicle and a business tool, and how has it impacted industries that you've experienced?
Yeah, so many things, honestly. But I think the most significant and really special and different thing about podcasts is how intimate they are, and how uniquely they are able to create meaningful human connections. Everyone who listens in on a podcast, everybody who's listening into this one, is really invited to listen in on a conversation, which just kind of hits different, and therefore is able to achieve a different level of trust and relationship than other content forms do. So It's pretty unique that way.
But what is it that you think is so crucial, though, about, the importance of human connection? Obviously, we are human beings, we are social beings. That is obviously very key. But what is it about the vehicle and the medium of podcasts? Why has it been so successful as a medium to impact work and learning and connection?
Yeah, I think, again, it is that connection, and kind of zooming out. So why? To the first part of your question is why does that even matter? And regardless of what tech or media or trends we're talking about, what always has been and what always will be is that the most human brands win. And that's because humans are connective beings. As a basic human need, we all crave connection, right? We're hardwired that way, and because that's a basic human need, that's a basic business need. And so, regardless of how we do it, regardless of what trends or tech we adopt, the brands that are able to focus on and prioritize human connection win. And the reason that podcasting is so good at that is, one, because we just talked about is it's intimate. You're able to listen in on a conversation, but also when you listen in on a podcast, you can do it as you're doing literally anything else. You can be really, really focused and sit and kind of watch the whole interview, or you can do it while you're mowing the lawn or shopping or working out, doing laundry. And because of the passive way that you're consuming that information, it actually does literally and figuratively hit different. And you think about that, no other content can be consumed that way. You can't, or at least you shouldn't, read a blog post while you're mowing the lawn. But you can with a podcast, and that really, it changes everything. It really invites your listener in on a conversation, and they also invite you in on their kind of day-to-day life and their day-to-day routine. So it's different.
And so, what advice might you give to marketing operations, leaders listening, in terms of, let's say they don't have a podcast today, but they're interested in producing one, or they're considering it and adding it as a part of their marketing operations function? What advice can you give them about that early decision? Yeah.
So we actually launched something late in the fall, so just a few months ago, called the B2B Podcasting Maturity Curve. And this came from the 4 years that we've been in business, that we've been watching the market and working with customers, and understanding what adoption of podcasting looks like at a B2B brand. There is no one size fits all. You don't go from, should I start a podcast, to having a show that millions listen to and that's driving real revenue overnight. And I'm sure you know that, and I know that. We experienced that firsthand. And so we did that to say, hey, this is where you get started, and this is what maturity looks like. And so to answer your question, what I would say is, one, just get started. Don't get bogged down on, but how is it going to drive revenue? How am I going to know who's listening? How am I going to use it in all these different ways? Start with conversation. Start by understanding, who is it for and why are you doing it? And then just start having good conversations and recording them and just test the channel, start experimenting, and carve out what makes the most sense for you. And ultimately knowing that it does have real power to make significant material impact on the business and its bottom line. But just get started.
Yeah. And what you mentioned revenue. Do you find in your experience, are creatives and, content creators, influencers, what role do you feel that they play in a brand that is creating a podcast? What role do you see that, creatives, content creators, influencers, what role do they play?
I think it depends on the brand, right? So sometimes that can end up being a host, that can end up being somebody, whether it's in the business or outside the business, being involved. But we also see product leaders and developers and marketers and salespeople very much involved in hosting and being a part of the show. And so depending on, that's why I always say start with who it's for and why are you doing it, as opposed to starting with, because I get this a lot, like what's everybody else doing? And should we go get an influencer? Should we have our CEO do the thing? Should we do this? Should we do that? I've seen it elsewhere. And so depending on who your brand is trying to reach and what you're trying to achieve, it might make sense to work with an influencer, to work with somebody who already has a name in the space, or to work with a creative or enlist an agency, or to leverage a thought leader who's already inside, who may or may not already have a voice and a platform, but is going to resonate with that audience that you're ultimately doing this for in the first place.
Well, and that has been one of the things that I have found so wonderful about this podcast, The Art of Marketing Operations, because the number of people that we have met, the range of experience that people have brought to this podcast, the experiences that they've shared, the learnings that they've shared, in their career, the lessons, small company, large company, B2B, B2C, CEO, CMO, to people who are just starting in marketing operations. It is absolutely fascinating to talk and learn from so many leaders, in the industry, across a variety of marketing disciplines, and also how broad the definition of marketing operations and just marketing is. That part alone is so exciting and inspiring for myself as a host. But just to meet so many people has been just so rewarding. Do you find that with your clients as well? Is that a sense of rewarding and inspiration?
Yeah, and even me personally, I've been doing the show. It casted for 4 years since we got started, and the whole reason Casted exists is because I was doing a show before that in my past life for a year or two. And so me personally, I have met so many people that have turned into so many different types of relationships. Sure, customers, yes, but partners and people that I've been able to connect with other people for jobs and opportunities and investment and board seats and product advancements. And that's really, really cool. And I hear the same thing. Specifically answer your question, we hear that from a lot of our customers as well. Yes, it's very cool. Yes, it's great for personal growth. Yes, it's great for connecting people from, within the network and the network that it creates. But also think about how it helps you stay on your toes and how it helps you to learn about what's happening in the industry and to really, ask questions. Honestly, I mean, there's so much talk around, GPT and generative AI and that there's a lot swirling there. And I know that there's a lot of you can just be really vulnerable and be like, hey, tell me what you know. Tell me what you're learning. Tell me what you're seeing. And it's a really great way to ask questions, learn a lot, and then share those learnings directly with others and build your network in the process. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that. And let's talk a little bit more about creativity. So when you think about creativity, how do you bring that, sort of into your daily life? from a work perspective. How do you bring that in every day?
Oh man, creativity. That's a big one for me that I love talking about. But specifically me. To me, day to day, it looks like conversations like these. Like I love having conversations and being really authentic and being able to get, vulnerable. Yes, sure. But also just, honest and curious. I think that's the right word. There is just really curious with other people about what they're thinking, what they're seeing, and big ideas, right? Like that's really fun and creative. But then from there is, okay, we had this great conversation. What else can we do with that conversation? We have this recording, and that's a really fun way to be creative too, which is, okay, I have this recording, I have this podcast, I have this video. Now what? How can I use parts of it to embed into blog posts? How can I turn, clips from all these different conversations into something so much bigger and more impactful? How can I repurpose this content that I already have to reach my audience, again, who is it for, in a new way? And so that's a really fun way to be creative. How can we get kind of artistically creative and visual with some of the things that were said in that show? There's so much that you can do. Like everything that we're talking about with the value of podcasting is absolutely 100% spot on. But that's like the middle of the onion. And there's so many more layers of what you can do with every single episode. And that's really fun. And it expands your reach, which just expands your impact too, right? And so I'm excited that I get to do that. That fuels me because it's not just about the conversation. It's about all the different things you can do with it, which I think is really fun. And then I can go on a soapbox from there about like why I think that what that means to the whole industry. But it's the fun stuff.
Well, and I also think that, when you think about all of the different content areas, you mentioned blog post. Obviously, there is at the highest level, advertising and SEM and search engine and SEO, et cetera. But then all of the other marketing materials, packaging, whatever, depending on what your product or service is. This is an important additional content source.
Yeah.
And then to your point, just as when you create a blog post and then that blog post can be used in content on a web page, that web page can be used as content in a video, that can be used, content from a blog, et cetera. It's another really important lever. But to your point, the thing that I find fascinating about podcasts is it's back to what you stated at the beginning. It is an interactive content source because now you are bringing in an expert. There is a conversation. There is a back and forth as opposed to just reading a web page or just reading an ad or just reading a blog post. There's a one-way nature to that, a one-way street. But a podcast allows a much more dynamic conversation and back and forth that livens the content that you are building. And through that process, not only is it livening, but it sort of deepens it and enriches it, and it creates something new. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 4.
Yeah.
So it's that's the part that I just think is so fascinating about podcasts.
Yeah. Well, and you think too, a website, a web page, a blog post, an article, all of those have been proofread and edited and, checked and polished, which is awesome. They should be. But, we didn't script this. We didn't say, okay, you say this and then I'm going to say this and then I'll laugh. Like these are ideas that we're just sharing, live and which is obviously really rich and authentic, but it's also really interesting. And then from this, we could use this conversation in so many ways. We could turn it into a really well-polished article and some takeaways, but like this part of it is just very real. And in the midst of so much, so much that is synthesized or automated, many of it, there's a lot of things out there that should be automated and robotic. That's cool, but like you can't replicate, you can't replace, you can't artificially produce an actual human conversation that is just improvised between two people. You just can't. You can pretend to, but you can't actually produce it unless it's two people talking, which is really cool.
So true. So true. So as a CEO, of a marketing company, what is some of the ways that you stay focused in sort of, dialing in on what's the most important thing for you to focus on today, for your teams to focus on today? What's the key to your success?
Oh, goodness. Depends on when you ask me. But I think it's you kind of already said it. It's prioritization. I think there's a book probably right behind me called Essentialism. And all throughout that, it mentions over and over and over the trivial many versus the critical few. And regardless of what your role is, personally or professionally, there's always going to be so much trivial stuff. There's no shortage of stuff. I'm scheduling a birthday party for my child right now. Like that's one of the things that I am just doing right now in the background of everything else. But I think at the beginning of every day, of every week, of every month, of every quarter, to the extent that you're able, whether it's kind of on the fly and a little bit, piecemeal, or really sitting down and taking the time to do it, you've got to say, okay, what needs to happen? What are the critical few things, as few as humanly possible, that I am, a question that I also ask myself and my team a lot. What am I uniquely able, gifted, talented, skilled to do right now? Like, sure, it's important. It's one of the critical few things. Is it a critical few thing? And am I like the one person that can and should do it? Then that's the priority, right? And if it's one of the critical few things and somebody else can or should do it, then I need to make sure that happens. And again, this is personal, professional, CEO, family, member of a team, because I think it's really easy to say, this is a really, really, really important thing, so I'm going to do it. Well, maybe it's a really, really, really important thing that somebody else should do. And how can I make sure that they know that they are uniquely positioned to be able to do it, how important it is. They have everything that they need to do it and to make it happen, the autonomy. But I think it's ruthless prioritization, right? And it's easier sometimes and in some situations than others. But I don't know if you can focus without it. I know I can't.
I like how you sort of go through a process of evaluating once you understand what it is that is the most important to do. Then sort of going through that assessment stage, which is, am I the right person? And or someone else on my team the right person? And and if you're not the right person and someone on your team is, does that person, are they empowered to know that they should be the ones that the one that is doing that? What resources do they need to ensure their success in doing that? So I love that. And I also, through some other, leaders that we've chatted with, also trying to sort of use data to understand, in that prioritization step that you talked about, trying to evaluate what is the yardstick that is being used to determine that this activity is more important than that activity. Is it ROI? Is it revenue? Is it retention? Is it sales? Is it, whatever it is. But what's your thought on making sure that you understand the yardstick of when you're prioritizing, what's the core factors that you're using to make this assessment of prioritization?
It's a really great question. And I think two things came to mind there. One is data, and don't forget that your gut is also data, right? So your gut, your mind, your internal computer, that's comprised of literally your entire life worth of observations and data, right? So if your gut tells you something's really important, it's probably right? So trust your gut. I think especially in a leadership role, I think that gets kind of beaten out of us, especially as marketers. For so many years, it's like, it's not about your gut, it's about the data. But then you kind of have to come back around to like, yeah, but my gut at this point in my career, I'm in a leadership role, that is data. So that's one. And then the other is you have to understand, especially marketers, I think it's really, really, really important. You have to understand the money-making model of the business. You have to. And so because it's a marketing priority or a sales priority, is it a business priority? And how do you know? Because what is the business doing right now? What state is the business in? Especially as we are in this macroeconomic situation that we are right now. As a marketer, the more you know about the business. And I think it's totally safe to ask. I think in 99% of businesses, like, hey, I want to understand more about the money-making model. Like, hey, CFO, hey, CEO, what do I need to know? What do you think that in my marketing role would be better? What do you wish I knew more of about the money-making model of the business so that I can better prioritize, so that I am not going after some really, really cool marketing campaign that isn't exactly what the business needs? So
I think that's great. I had someone tell me a long time ago, follow the dollars. Follow the dollars.
Yep, and you have to know how in order to do that. You have to know where they go and where they come from.
Exactly. Because to your point, I think if you can understand how the dollar flows, where the dollar comes in, what is the customer valuing to pay those dollars, and then when they come in, where are the costs coming from? What is that leading to from a profitability perspective? And then as it repeats, retention, et cetera. Understanding all of those things, I think that is, back to your comment about prioritization, that helps because then you can assess as a marketing operations leader, you can assess, if I have a cleaner sort of view, a true north of, okay, this is how this specific business, because marketing operations, team members, we've had multiple episodes on this podcast where somebody works for an extremely large company but gets recruited to a smaller company, or someone who's starting at a startup and builds everything from the beginning, but then they move over to a different company, completely different platform, all the MarTech stack is different, completely new challenges. But the part that stays the same, that's universal, is the way that the money flows. Now, the way in which it goes is going to be different, how it's actually measured, et cetera. And if you can understand that, to your very point, how does the business work? Partner with the CFO, a chief revenue officer, a customer officer, whoever it is at the organization. Understanding that will help set the priority and the roadmap for marketing activities that are going to make a difference.
Yep. And it will set you apart. I mean, if you are an entry-level marketer listening today, go ask those questions. If you are a CMO, ask more questions. And because it sets you apart. It helps you to make decisions differently. And that's one of the things that I have absolutely learned so much more in, moving from a marketing leader to a CEO seat, is just being so acutely aware of everything that we're talking about. It will set you apart as a marketer. And it will also, especially with so much uncertainty right now, and I don't care what business you're working for, or if you're a human right now, like, things are uncertain, right? And the more
if you're a human listening to this right now,
things are crazy, And the more you understand about how your business makes money and the path that those dollars go through, the less uncertain you'll feel. You'll know more, and you'll understand more about what's happening in your business, what's likely to happen down the road, and what you can do to help. And that feels good, right?
Well, and also to your point, so much of, whether it's a MarTech platform or understanding, through a Google report or, some sort of, metric analysis or reporting or schedule, we pride ourselves on both the left brain and the right brain. There is the right brain, the creative side, et cetera. It's the left brain understanding the data, et cetera. But I think understanding the business gives you that data of understanding, what do I need to measure?
Yeah.
Because if I can better understand what I'm measuring, I'm going to have a better impact on this business.
Yep. And how to better interpret what is being measured, right?
Yeah.
And so, and let's look at, like, one of the ways that shows up, right? So if you understand the money-making model, you're better able to understand what leadership, whether you're in leadership and what your peers are saying, or you're not in leadership and what leaders are saying, to be able to, again, ask more questions and focus on the right things. Like, if you better understand the data, you might hear messaging differently and be like, hey, I think I'm hearing that, just, I don't know, random example. I think maybe we need to focus a little bit more on our existing customers. I think I'm going to get creative, and I have some ideas about how we can do that. Or like, man, it sounds like what I'm hearing is like new customer acquisition is like super, super, super important right now. And I have better understanding of why. I'm going to go get creative and come to the table with some ideas about what maybe we can do, as opposed to spreading yourself really thin and trying to do all the things and then getting frustrated because a lot of your ideas don't get heard because they're not aligned with what the business actually needs at that moment.
Mm-hmm. I recall a situation earlier in my career where there was a product that we were launching into the market, and we were so strong at releasing that specific product. It was more of a service, and we were the best. And so, but we really wanted to understand the customers, from the customer's view, how we were doing and how we were sort of stacking up to the competition. And through that research that we did, it was very primary empirical research, we learned for sure we were statistically significantly better than every one of our competitors at delivering that service. But in terms of motivating factors, there were 32 factors that came up from that company. There were 32 decision points that the customer measured, and this service was the least important. So what we learned was we were the absolute industry best at doing something that customers could care less about.
Which is hilarious, but I think that that's more common than we think.
I know. It was absolutely fascinating. And so then by understanding where the customer was coming in and where we make revenue and what's driving revenue to drive the customer's behavior to say yes, we suddenly shifted all of our internal marketing priorities to focus on what the customer what was going to make them say yes.
Yeah.
That was most important.
Yeah.
And so I just found that was a fascinating experience.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And changes everything.
So it totally does. And so, okay, so we've talked about obviously podcasting, but are there other thought leadership activities that are unique, similar to podcasting, that either you've done or that you want to do in the future around, thought leadership?
Yeah, and I'm obviously biased, right? Everything at this point, after 4 years, I see everything through podcasting first. However, I think one thing that really excites me is other ways to achieve this type of content, right? So go do, for example, live events, live in-person events and live virtual events, right? Where there is content like this, like you and I could be on a stage right now in front of 5,000 people capturing this exact same conversation. And those 5,000 people would be there in the room and they'd be hearing it live, which would be really cool. And we could be streaming it, right? So then we'd be reaching how many other people streamed, and then we could record it exactly like we're doing, and then publish it, syndicate it, ring it out, use it in multiple other ways. So that I'm really excited about too, because it's the in-person interaction, it's the live virtual interaction, and then you get to where we are now. So it's kind of killing those poor birds, killing multiple birds with one stone, which is really nice. And I think that we're going to see a lot more of that, is like, how can we kind of like up the ante? If we're going to have this conversation anyway, why don't we go bigger? And then on the flip side, once we do this content, what are we going to do with it? And how can we kind of think with the end in mind? So maybe this conversation recorded in the exact same way is a little bit more of a webinar, and we have some visuals and we're talking through data. And so I think it's taking the why and taking the authenticity of this type of conversation and saying, how could we, again, get creative about how we capture it and what context in which we capture it? Who else is around? Who else is there to hear? And also, how can we use this type of conversation to be more really authentic and rich and real while doing something that we've already been doing, like webinars and presentation and, slide decks, but maybe we have more of a conversation around it that we capture and share, as opposed to, I'm going to click, welcome to the webinar. I'm going to click through every slide on this and tell you how the product works. So product launches and, demos and things like that. I think that there's a lot that can be done with this level of authenticity and used in the same way.
Well, and I want to build on what you just said there, because there's some common threads that I just sort of heard you say. some of the common threads of this content creation is there's a sense of a live component. There's a sense of a conversation. There's a sense of a dynamism to the content. There's a two-way street to the creation of this content. There is a shared respect and desire for co-creation and co-learning through that process. And all of those common threads, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a live event, as you mentioned, a webinar, a live remote webinar, that content, it is a new thing. And not new in the sense that, of course, we've always had webinars for years and so forth. But I think what I love about how you're sort of positioning that is looking at this content that we're creating and creating something new. It's not just a brochure. It's not just a web page. It's not just it's something that is wholly new. And multiple reuses, whether it's social media, whether it's on TikTok, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's broadcast on YouTube or what have you. So I love that. I think that's really, really powerful. How you're kind of sort of approaching additional forms of thought leadership.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm excited about it. And it's some cool stuff that we're doing. It's some cool stuff that some of our customers and partners are doing, but I'm also seeing it start to emerge just as an observer too. And I'm excited for this appreciation of the humanness of conversations like these, and that people are starting to ask questions and get really creative about how to use it in really unique ways. And so I'm here for it. I'm excited.
I love that. And then as you look out into the market, either at your current company or as you talk with your clients, et cetera, what is sort of your view on the connection of what you're seeing between sort of the physical marketing that's out there, as well as the digital marketing? So sort of this notion of creating an integrated strategy. What's your sort of view of that and experience?
Man, I feel like I'm going to sound like a broken record, but again, just more human. I think the more human that brands get, whether it's with a mailer or an event or goodness, I mean, even a billboard, like the things that resonate, whether they're super old school or super new idea, are the things that appeal to the human, right? And so you said one of my favorite words, which is integrated. I'm an integrated marketer through and through. And the more that you can say, okay, again, who's it for? What are we trying to achieve here? How can we really appeal to humans en masse in what we send them, in what we show them, in what we mail to them, in the ads that we place? Like that's what I'm seeing. And I'm seeing it. I'm seeing people and brands get really creative about what they're sending and what they're doing. And I think that comes from tech advancements and a lot of the noise that's rising, and how the marketplace is louder than it's been. And it's about to get a whole lot louder with things like ChatGPT, and people who sure use it well, but a lot of people who won't, as we know. It's just human nature. It's going to be it's just going to be more noisy. And so there's people that are like, okay, how are we going to cut through? What are we going to do that's different? Human. And with everything that we've been through as a human, species on this planet over the last few years, people just want goodness and things that feel good and things that feel funny and things that make them feel known and seen. And again, that's very human. And so, whether it's a direct mail or a postcard or an ad or a video or whatever, a blog post, the things that really kind of hit to the humanness and hit to emotion and heart, I think that it's such a good thing. And I see more of it in our future.
I think that is very, very powerful what you just stated, because a takeaway that I have from your insights there is making sure that every single customer touch point, whether it's a physical touch point, as you mentioned, a mailer, a trade show booth, what have you, or a digital touch point, a mobile app, a website, an ad, an email confirmation, whatever it is, making every one of those touch points authentic, making every one of those touch points reinforcing the brand, positive human connection, and looking at it through that lens really makes for a cohesive brand and a cohesive marketing strategy. I think that's really powerful.
And it's one that'll win.
Yeah.
It just will.
So Lindsay, before we wrap up today's episode, what is the main takeaway that you want to share to help understand the challenges that are facing marketing operations executives today?
The most human brands win. And that was true. It's always been true, and it always will be true.
I love that. We're going to leave it right there. This wraps up this episode of The Art of Marketing Operations. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lindsay.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Excellent. Well, until next time, stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to The Art of Marketing Operations, brought to you by Taylor. Don't forget to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and share. Until next time.